Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give everyone a couple of more minutes to file in before we get started. Thanks so much for joining us on a Wednesday in the summer.
It's a beautiful day here, Nate, in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Is it? It's quite
Yeah,
gray here in Los Angeles. You had idyllic weather, Paul.
we've had a beautiful summer. It's been in the the high 70s every day. Sunny, no humidity, no bugs. This is truly God's land, Nate.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We're going to give everyone another minute or two. We still have a fair amount of people coming in, and then we'll kick things off. And we really got a full house here. That's great. I think some people are interested in markdowns, Paul.
Well, uh, the last time we gave this presentation, if you recall, Nate, we had five people suffer heart palpitations, and two retailers were had to leave the webinar because they were diagnosed with a case of bad vibes. So it was kind of a touchy subject for them at that time.
Absolutely. Well, I think it'll be much more approachable this time. I don't think
Yes,
we'll need a
no,
doctor's warning.
there you go. No, it's a fun. It's a yeah. We're gonna have fun for the next 45 minutes. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, oh, we still got some people coming in. I think it started to slow down a little bit. Great. Why don't we kick it off? Well, thanks everyone. Welcome to another workshop here with Paul and I. Paul is the godfather of retail. I think he's pretty much taught anyone who knows anything about retail. He sat them down on his knee to do so. So we're very lucky to have him. Myself, I'm always learning tremendous things about Paul, but also just learning a tremendous amount from our retailers. We're Management One. We've been doing this for almost 40 years and helping and working with thousands of retailers to drive results. And one of the big issues that comes up in retail is markdowns. And so we want to set the record straight, go through a little bit of how to be successful. And at the end of this session, we want you to be able to walk away with what are the factors leading to markdowns? How can you be proactive, not reactive? When you are doing markdowns, how do you do them the right way and why are they necessary? And then finally, what your business has to gain from a successful markdown strategy. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll walk away with very clear inputs. Obviously, we'll give you a lot of examples of what's working through, right now through several of the retailers that we work with. Before we jump into the content, we'd love to sort of kick it off with a poll here. And I think, there are a couple things, Ashley, if we can cue that up, that we'd love to hear from you is how often do you currently take markdowns? What is the cadence? What is the process you currently have? And how do you relate that to your cash flow picture? Please tell us. And while we're waiting for those results, Paul, I'm curious, as we dive into it, what the questions will be. I think we're going to get a lot of questions about, how do I handle this specific circumstance? And I think, the main takeaway we want people to have is this is a process, right? This is something that you need to think about in the context of your business, not just, one-offs all the time.
The presentation is really going to what I call, Nate, we're going to open up the kimono a bit on markdowns. I think a lot of retailers really uh, they really don't understand markdowns in some way, or they have a poor understanding of it. So we want to kind of clear that up. When do you take them? What are good markdowns? What are bad markdowns? We're going to cover a whole lot of stuff over the next 40 minutes.
Awesome. Well, it's looking like a lot of people are doing end of season and only when inventory is stuck. So we're definitely going to be addressing that. And yeah, it's about 40% of people are not really relating markdowns to cash flow. So we're going to touch on that as well. I think as we get into the specific, as we get into the later parts and we get questions, one thing, if we have the next slide, Paul, one thing that we want to really think about is, if you have to drop off early or you have a specific question about your business, this is how you can get in touch with Paul or I. And really, markdowns are a necessity in the retail game. And so how can you make sure that you are going to be planning them, having them be part again as a process, not just simply as something that needs to be reactionary. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. But if you want to get in touch with us to really come up with a plan, make sure that this is part of your process, please feel free, to reach out. We're always happy to answer questions. And obviously, if you're ready to take the next step forward of planning this out along with the rest of your inventory purchases, that's our bread and butter. That's what we always love to talk about as well.
Nate,
So
we've got a slide up here that says, "Are markdowns friends or foes?"
yeah,
I sometimes think they're neither, right? you know,
it's a tool.
but yeah, it is absolutely a tool. And getting back to what I spoke about just a couple of minutes ago, a lot of retailers, are they good? Are they bad? When do I take them? What's the most efficient way to take markdowns? Do markdowns stigmatize my store as being a sales store and my customers will only shop me when I mark things down? That's a big fear that I think you and I have heard over the years from a lot of retailers. And I'm sure they affect profitability, but I don't know in how they affect profitability. And those are just some of the things that we're going to be opening up in this presentation today. Um, I gave I remember I gave one presentation a few years ago, and the title of it was "Beware of False Prophets," but there was profits were PROFITS, and that
Yep.
whole that the whole basis of that was you can you know how you can control markdowns. Everybody should be having a piece of paper and a pencil out to write this down. A great way to control markdowns is to never take them. Just keep your
Wow.
merchandise at full price. This is the kind of advice you don't get everywhere. But you know what would happen then? Your store would be out of business within a matter of probably a year. Customers would quit coming in. Your merchandise would be old. It would be stagnant. You would lose capital because you wouldn't be able to turn the inventory to bring in new, and all of that would be on their way to bankruptcy court. So we know we have to take markdowns, but are they friends or are they foes?
Exactly. And I think what we want to get, you know, we want to get into why are some of the reasons why retailers avoid them. And I think one of the reasons that there's a couple of reasons here. One of them is there's a little bit of the accountant shaming. And markdowns do affect margin, right? And on the P&L, you will see it show up in a higher cost of goods sold, and so it does compress margins. But what it's really, really affecting and why markdowns are a tool is that is ignoring the crucial component of time. And so margins do not tell the whole story, especially when you have low sell-through items. And delaying the inevitable is not actually helping you be in the business of rotating fresh goods into the business. And so that's why when we talk about markdowns, what we're not talking about is being a perpetually on sale retailer. And so that's not what we're talking about. And I think that's the second thing that a lot of retailers are really, really worried about is, well, if I'm constantly taking markdowns, does that mean that I'm just going to be people are walking in and they see for sales on sale 40% off signs everywhere. No, 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 that's not what we're talking about at all. What we're talking about is using this important tool, this crucial tool, to keep the goods flowing. That's what we're talking about.
And let me just add one thing, one thing. Um, you, if you listen, sometimes accountants will tell a retailer, don't take markdowns because you start losing money when you take markdowns. So try to avoid them if at all possible. And they put a scare into them that retailers don't really take the markdowns to the degree they should in the cadence that they should. And I think it's important just to say that in retail, markdowns are not a zero sum game. In other words, not everybody loses with markdowns. Markdowns are not a zero sum game because typically you're going to have something on the sales floor in a very short period of time, once you sell that item at a markdown price, that will take its place, that will likely sell at a profitable price. And so
Exactly.
this is what you were talking about. I think Nate, and time and flow of new inventory coming in.
Exactly. Exactly. So why don't we jump into our second poll? How do you currently decide which products to mark down? What is your current process? Oh, do we have that to kick off, Ashley?
Yes, poll
Oh,
is.
there we go. There we go. And so now, while we're waiting for everyone to, give us a little bit of feedback as to, what their own process is, I think, Paul, the important thing, and that's really, I think you touched on an important aspect is the causality is in reverse, right? The markdowns isn't actually what's causing the loss. The loss is there, whether you recognize it or not. It's just the timing of it. That's really the crucial aspect to it.
That's right.
Okay. All right, great. So we have a lot of people looking at their aging reports. That's really important. And then, okay, whatever hasn't sold in a while seems to be also a strong contender. So that has us thinking, the process isn't as robust as it can be, but that's okay. This is what's part of the learning. This is what's part of becoming a stronger retailer. Paul, can you tell us a little bit about what the expense of markdowns is all about?
I will. It's a little sticky after we put that up, so hang on. Let me just try to move this. By the way, let me just say this. There was one person who said in the poll, gut instinct, and do not be ashamed of that. Uh, um, Gut instinct, in my opinion, is a factor on how to mark things down. I knew a retailer in California years ago. He had 15 boutiques in California, and he would tell me he could pull it out of the box, and he could almost tell if this was going to be a problem. It was not what he remembered he saw in the showroom, right? And so what he did is he pulled out of the box, but he wouldn't mark it down right away. He would let it sit for 2 weeks. If the sell-through was poor, like practically nothing sold across 15 locations, he would then immediately call the vendor and say, can I send this back? It's not going to sell. I know it's going to sell. And can you send me some other items in place of it? Now, he wasn't asking for a refund. He was asking just to exchange merchandise. And what he found and what he told me was that 90% of the time, the vendors would do that as long as he did it quickly. And how he did it, this is again to that one brave individual who you said one on the gut instinct. What he used was gut instinct. Now, I want to talk about markdowns as an expense. And we've been kind of talking about how great markdowns are, but let's keep it all in perspective. They are an expense. Now, the thing with markdowns, though, is that all your other expenses you write a check for. You have a payroll expense, you have the rent expense, you have marketing expense, you have all these expenses that are all on your profit and loss statement, and you write and the one expense that can be the largest expense in your store. And by the way, what we're showing here is just some generic numbers on expense percentages. Advertising can be anywhere from 1 to 3 to 5% of sales. Occupancy costs can be as low as 5% of sales to as high as we've seen it as high, Nate, as 20% of sales. Payroll
Yep.
can be all over the board. these are some generic numbers that you can use in terms of where a lot of retailers fall on their key expenses. Markdowns, 20% is very common. 20% of sales. Markdowns can be, and usually are for most retailers, the largest expense they have. But again, they don't write a check for it, but they show up on their profit and loss statement, and they show up as an increase in cost of goods sold. And there's one other cost to a retailer that shows up as an increase in cost of goods sold. Do you know what that is, Nate?
What's that, Paul?
That's called shrinkage. And that is called either bookkeeping errors, which is 25% of your shrinkage, and 75% is, and I know this is shocking, and it doesn't happen, Nate, here in Minnesota because people don't steal things here. We're good Lutheran Norwegian people, but people come in the store and steal stuff. And
Yeah, who
so
would have
that
thought? I'm
also
clutching my pearls.
that also increases the cost of goods sold as well. Now, just like your payroll and just like most of your expenses you have, we need to have an idea of
Hmm.
how much of that money we're going to spend. Now, Nate, you and I talked about this last month on our webinar we had last month, the winning webinar that we had last month, by the way, on budgeting. And
Yep.
but I do want to repeat this because it's worth repeating when it comes to markdowns. Markdowns that can and should be budgeted. Now, how do you go about doing that? So the example I've got on this particular slide is that we've got a retailer that has an initial markup of 2.5. That's what he or she averages over the course of a year, which is 60% of the original retail price is markup. Now we have a budget in this case of $500,000 because we want to do $1 million in sales because our gross margin goal is 50%, but our initial markup is 60%. So when you take the inventory budget of 500,000 times 2.5, I know that you didn't think there was going to be math in this presentation, but there is a little math. We all have to eat our vegetables. So when we take 500,000 on our purchases, we're literally thinking about that as marking that that inventory investment up to 1.25 million. But our goal is to sell it for 1 million. And so voila, our markdown budget is the difference between the IMU, the initial markup, and the MMU, the maintained markup after markdowns. So in this case, we'd have $250,000 in a budget. The point I want to make here,
Yep.
Nate, is this. When we show new clients how many markdowns they can take and reach their profit goals, I think the vast majority of them are somewhat shocked by that number. They didn't know that. It's okay. In this particular example, which I think, Nate, is a common example, by the way. This isn't like
Right.
some unique example. For $1 million retailer, that retailer typically should be taking at least $250,000 in markdowns a year.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? Is that budgeting it ahead of time allows for them to be done in a sensible way. And let's talk about what that is. I mean, there's a lot of good to markdowns. The most important one being it keeps the inventory fresh, which is all about how we're flowing in the goods to maintain attention in the store and being able to captivate and show off the curation that's happening. The next element is it assures good cash flow, which is we are in the business as retailers to make dollars work. And those dollars can only work if they're rotating. And we want those dollars to be sweating and turning and reinvesting. And that's the flow of goods matches the good cash flow. And finally, the cost of doing business, as Paul just mentioned and we walked through, I mean, it is if you budget for it, if you have it in there, it's not the evil expense, it's the budgeted expense. And that's really the key of how the tenets of good. Now, just like there's good, there can be bad. And I think a lot of times the reactive markdowns can be a very high expense. And so there is a period of, it's going to be one of the highest expenses, even when it's budgeted, as Paul just walked through. And it also, can result in a higher cost of goods sold, resulting in net loss. Now, that loss, usually when you have especially when you have low sell through items, it's already there. You're just realizing it and you're getting the cash back, which is the most important aspect, so that you can bring something in that can really be turning.
We talked a lot, Nate, about markdowns are they're an issue, of course, they're an expense, but they're really not a problem. And when I say that, and is that it's important for every retailer that's listening to my voice now needs to understand they are not a problem. They are a tool to solve a problem. And what we need to do is we need to find out what that problem is that if
Exactly.
markdowns are too high, what is causing that? And so I want to talk a little bit, and I think we should talk a little bit about some of the root causes of why stores would take excessive markdowns to the point where they're not even making money. And the
Right.
first one is super common. It is wide and thin. Now, Nate, you and I have heard well, you should have a narrow and deep inventory. You should beware of wide and thin assortments. And I think that's common jargon in our industry. But I want to kind of do a couple of exercises. One is an example, and another one is an exercise of how a retailer can get their inventory in this situation that it can only mean bad things. And so this is a little bit of a exercise that I like doing with retailers. And so Nate, you have a pen store. All you sell are pens. That's it. And and we know because we're using the greatest forecasting tool known to mankind, which is the Management One algorithm engine, that we
Exactly.
know that we're going to sell 12 pens this month. That's through history, that's through trending, that's through a lot of things that go into that forecast. But the forecast is very, very accurate. We're going to sell 12. So, Nate, if I'm going to sell 12 pens, how many pens do I need to have in my inventory to be in the perfect condition in terms of inventory?
Well, they're always giving us brain teasers, but I'm gonna go on a limb and say 12.
That is why he is the CEO of this company, ladies and gentlemen, because that is 100% right. All we need is if we're only going to sell 12 pens, then why would we need to have more than 12 in our inventory? It seems illogical. So the answer is if you sell 12, you need 12. Thank you, everybody. That ends the webinar for today. I hope you got a lot out of it. And oh, I forgot one thing. That pen, that I'm talking about right here, well, it
Hmm.
comes in 12 colors. And the thing is that every one of my customers that come in the store, your customers that come in the store this month, are going to be emotionally attached to one particular color. So, how many do we need to carry now?
Well, now we're multiplying 12 by 12, I think.
Yeah, so we hate to have 100. So we got to have 144 color. Have to have 144 pens. Oh, one other thing too, I forgot to tell you this too, Nate. This pen here that I'm holding up, it comes in a longer size. So there's two sizes, and each size comes in 12 colors. So now how many do we need?
All right, so now we got to double that.
Right. So 144, 288. Right? Everybody with me? How many are we going to sell this month?
Or we're still only selling 12.
Correct. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the origin of inventory problems, which is an origin of markdown problems. And that is a good explanation of trying to please everybody, which is what a wide and thin inventory is. Now, I'm going to show you a real life example that was theoretical, but fun. So I'm going to show you a real life example. We have a client in Budapest, Hungary, and yes, we do. And I was there last year, and I was taken into one of their stores. They have about 60 locations. I was taken into one of their locations right in the heart of Budapest, and it was their number one location. It's in a mall, and that you see, I took a picture with my iPhone of a wall of shoes, and it's against a wall that's glass, so you can see outside into the mall. I looked at this and I looked over at the CFO and I said, "My God, is that all the same shoe, all in different colors?" And he said, "Yes, it is. And you need to talk to the president about this because he believes if we show them a large assortment of colors, that'll help sales. And I believe it does the opposite. It hurts sales. And he is right. Now, the next day, I'm in a meeting, and I swear all three of these guys, the president, the owner, and the CFO, are wearing that shoe, the best selling shoe they have. What's happening is they're completely missing business. The customer wants to buy that shoe, but they're always out of sizes. But they've got a lot of it. They've got a lot of full size runs in yellow. And this is how retailers get into the trap. They get into a trap of, again, this is called wide and thin. And it was the heart, believe me, when we got these people as a client, it was truly the heart of their inventory problems, was simply they were not focusing on who their customer really is.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think the next, root cause is what we're calling holding on to the inventory. And what do we mean by that? Well, I mean, fundamentally, it's holding things for too long after you have the signal that your sell through is low. It's as simple as that. But as as we've talked about, it's not just that flowing fresh inventory is attracting your customers. It's that also the slow moving inventory is like a cancer or a repellent to your customers. And so that is one of the other elements to why thinking or being afraid of having temporary margin compression by realizing markdowns and realizing, that the sell through is not necessarily going to improve with time. That's what also leads to higher markdowns and higher, I would say higher episodic markdowns where you have to do clearance sales. But without that, without getting the cash back, it's really, really hard to have a vibrant store.
Someone once told me, because I use this term cancer quite a bit, and someone once told me, they said, maybe isn't that a little harsh? And what I said, Nate, was not really, because I think really when it comes down to it, our holding inventory for too long is becomes a cancer in the store, and it metastasizes through your entire operation. And when I say metastasizes, it affects sales. Why? Because you hold it for too long, a very common problem that retailers have. They hold inventory for too long and don't flow enough new because they're sitting with this merchandise that's not selling. So it hurts sales. It hurts your cash flow, obviously, because if you're not selling it, you're not cashing out of it. And it also eventually hurts profitability because you will
Exactly.
eventually have to mark it down at some point. And one last thing it metastasizes on. And this is I don't want to I'm not Nate, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but it also affects your taxable income. Because
Right.
as this merchandise, if you count this inventory, there's an old saying, Nate, that there's no birthday parties for inventory in any retail
Yeah,
store. I don't care
hopefully.
what it is, and the reason for that is A, cash flow, but B is if you're a profitable store and you count inventory twice, you're paying a tax to the federal government on that same item
Yeah. Well,
every
let's
year.
not get, yeah, we don't want to get people confused beyond. And I'm just getting a reminder to put questions in the Q&A section versus the chat
Yeah.
section. That'll make it easier for the rest of the team. But awesome. Yeah. And I think when we can sort of look through, a couple different scenarios. One is a retailer that does not mark down old stock, does not sell. You will see fewer repeat business, and I got to tell you, is like that is the heart and soul of so much of specialty retail is repeat customers. Like that is the secret sauce to being a specialty retailer. This is why in this scenario it can be so pernicious, and why you really want to avoid not marking down, not flowing through new. Contrast that with a different scenario, which is you're accepting the markdowns, you're budgeting them out, you're being proactive, and you're making sure you have enough cash on hand to flow in new goods. You're giving people a reason to come into the store. And that is what we're talking about is the difference between those two scenarios is how do you accept them, budget them, and fundamentally you're giving your audience, your customers, your shoppers a reason to come in multiple times a year to the store. And it's not just in the physical store, it's to the online store as well. This is both a brick and mortar as well as an e-commerce concept. It applies to both. And I think, you know, Paul, I know you've seen this root cause as well a fair amount. The overbuying.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's such a trite statement to say that if you buy more merchandise than you can profitably sell, it's going to end up in excessive markdowns. But it is true. I mean, there are X amount of customers that come through your store every day, every week, and every month, and every season. And we can predict that and using historical information. And when you ignore that, buy more than what the traffic will bear, the obvious net result is going to be markdowns. Plus, you're also creating and overbuying another problem that was really there's a book out, Nate, about 20, 25 years ago by Schwartz. It's called The Paradox of Choice. And basically, Schwartz was saying, and it wasn't a book on retail, it was a book on the abundance of the culture we live in the United States, which makes people actually
Mhm.
unhappy because we can have anything. But retailers, we accepted that as our own. And it really is true. I mean, when my two youngest daughters were little, I would take them to an ice cream parlor and it has 60 flavors. Nate, I got out of that ice cream parlor in 2 hours, I'd be lucky. Up and down, they go, look. And I would go, and I finally went to my older daughter one day. I go, why is this always a problem? I always have to be
Yeah.
here.
Well, we have
Or, and
a
I, and why? I know you're going to take cookies and cream. And she looked at me and she goes, Dad, but there's so many things to pick from. We don't want to make the wrong choice. And I think
yeah.
out of the lips of out of the mouth of babes comes really, really, really good advice. Now, there have been studies on this, and Nate, I know this is one of your studies that you really like on jam.
Yeah, I think just what Paul is talking about, there's a study, we don't need to go into the details. Suffice it to say, they looked at when you put out more jams versus less at a farmer's market. What's fascinating is that they discovered people, when they had the bigger jam selection, they took more tastes, but they actually bought fewer jars. And so, similar to Paul's point about the ice cream, this is also relates back to wide and thin assortments. Giving people too many choices makes it harder for the shopper to actually make a clear decision. That's what we're talking about. And we want to avoid that. And that's what overbuying can cause, is if you have too much on the floor, if you have too many options, people can't choose. And Paul, I think you also have an example
Well,
of this.
this is one of my favorite ones. This is a shoe retailer I know, and he when he trains his people to sell on the floor, he is very what he considers important is not to give the customer too many choices when they're in the chair trying on shoes. And so he teaches them that they should never have more than two choices in front of them when they're trying on shoes. And when a woman sits down to try on shoes and she has two pair of shoes, two different pairs of shoes to try on, and then she says to the salesman, gee, I like these, but remember the other one we were looking at before? Can you bring those over and I can try those on too? His salespeople are taught to tell her that absolutely, which one of these do you want me to take away? I mean, that's how serious, and this is a very successful retailer, but that's how serious he is about giving his customers a limited choice, which he knows helps sales.
And I think that's how you can tie these concepts into actual operations. And so that's a great example. And I think, when we talk about these markdown pitfalls, and again, we're going to get into, specific ways people run markdowns successfully, but it's really, really important that we go through the causes there. And I think, a unifying factor of how to avoid these is to plan ahead. And so Paul ran down, the example of how it gets budgeted, but this is why we talk about and why Management One has it in there in our reports about being able to budget this ahead of time, because then you can have a process around it. Similar to the question we asked earlier, are you doing it at end of season? How are you judging those seasons? How are you tracking that? And so if you're planning ahead, This is how you make it just a normal cost of business. And you can also even reverse engineer that into where do I need to set my initial prices as a result of that, which we haven't even really talked about, but that's also a common trap that many retailers don't understand, that they have a lot of latitude to set those initial markups to be able to then have a sensible markdown strategy. And so this is just really an example to say is, do you want to be on the left reactive or do you want to be proactive? And similar to overbuying or overwhelming with choice, you want to be curators of an experience for your community, for your audience. This is part of reducing the anxiety by planning it out, by getting ahead of it. Obviously, at M1, we have a strong preference for being able to organize this by your structure, class structure, to be able to make sure that it's manageable. If it's reactive, it's really, really, really hard to stay on top of it. This is where the clearance sales comes out, but those should be resetting the stage so that you're on a stronger footing to then be proactive going forward. If you, as I mentioned before, if you want to talk to us again, understand that not everyone can stay on. I think, Paul, we have some contact information on the next slide. But if you want to dive deeper on how to be proactive versus reactive, please reach out to us. Happy to talk through a strategy session to dive deeper. It's really, really important, whether you work with us or not, that you're planning this ahead, that you're thinking about how to incorporate markdowns in a healthy way, using them as the tool they were intended to drive inventory health, cash flow health, and actually, Paul, right, sales growth as well.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And real quick, just share a story from yesterday. I was talking to a retailer, uh, and uh, and the entire conversation, Nate. And now this is August 12th. What was yesterday? I think August
Yep.
12th. On August 12th, the entire conversation was this retailer was, where are we now right now, our position on inventory, and where do we need to be 4 months from now on January 1? And basically, based on, and that's what Nate, you were saying about planning. They need all markdowns need to be planned, and so does positions of inventory, which control markdowns. If he goes into January with too much inventory, the end result's going to be too many markdowns, loss of profitability, and bad cash flow. And so everything for this retailer, and I'm not going to tell you who it was, but it wasn't a big retailer, but we wanted to reduce inventory by $300,000 over the next 4.5 months. Now, what does that mean to him? That's at retail. That's $150,000 improvement in his cash flow. And it's going to be $300,000 less inventory to mark down in January when there will be less customers in the store because January is his worst month. He goes from his best month, December, to his worst month. You need this information. You need to have these sets of goals, these points along the calendar that you know where you are and where you should be, and then you can make decisions from that. So I want to talk a little bit though
Exactly.
about markdowns and the right way and some things that I believe, this is my own personal opinion on what retailers need to do. And the first one is, I believe that you should tell your customer when you have a markdown why. And why should you do that? Because if you don't, then your sales floor is a series of racks that have, and this is the worst thing. This is like a cross to a vampire to me, Nate. When I walk in, they see it says sale, sale.
Right.
That's all it says. And so what happens is to the consumer is that you've not told them why it's on sale, and it creates this doubt of, well, this is on sale here, but when are you going to put that on? Because you never told me why. And so I don't care, Nate, what you tell me. It's a super sale, it's a
Right.
weekend sale, it's a big sale, it's a final sale, it's a liquidation sale, it's a discontinued item sale, it's a
Yeah.
Friday
Don't be
afternoon
generic.
sale. It doesn't matter, but tell them why. I think that's very, very important.
100%.
The other thing too is, and that is that I think what's important is that we need to understand is that it has been proven that consumers respond to a known amount. And so, what do we mean by that? and and Nate, you and I talk about this actually quite a bit because we see it in malls, we see it in stores where retailers are very clearly moving away from percentage off.
Right.
And because and I have a feeling about percentage off because I think A, it's irritating to the customer because we're making him do a mathematical calculation and we all stink at math, right? And two, and why is it dangerous? Because percentage off has proven to be an addiction much like alcoholism, where you have to have more and more and more to get high,
Yep.
so to speak. And so
Yep.
they had an interesting study in December of 2019, just before the pandemic. They interviewed shoppers around the country and shopping centers, and they asked them what would be a percentage off that would entice you to go into a store you normally wouldn't go in. The answer, 40%. Now, when I was in retail, 15-20% would bring them in flocks. But today, that you get that from giving a retailer your email address. So that is why it is so important, and this works. And everyone on this call, please start doing this. Don't start moving away percentage off and tell the consumer how much it's going to be on that rack. For example, and you see here, Nate,
Yep.
all dresses on this rack, $39.99. That works a lot better than percentage off, and I hope everybody starts to do that.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you
Yeah, and
want
I
me to
think
go through this or the,
no, we gotta get through the rest in the next. We want to make sure we get through the rest of the tips in the next 5, 7 minutes.
yeah, I mean, so this is just using why you go percent. If you have an item for 20 at $38, that's 25% off. You're selling it for 28.50, but they buy it at 29.99 as fast as 28.50, and that's 21% off. If you have an item at $98, that's 20% off. Nobody knows what it's selling for. It's $78. They would buy it because it's 20% off. But really, they would buy it as fast as 79.99. That's 18% off. This adds up over the course of a year. If you're talking about incremental improvements in taking markdowns over 1, 2, 3, 4%, and you're talking about taking $250,000 in markdowns, these small percentage improvements, Nate, become big dollars for retailers.
Right. Right.
And so that is also very, very important. And I just want to, and this is, I know I'm gonna go fast, Nate, okay? But your first markdown is the cheapest is an old adage in retail. It's true, but not how people think it is. They think if I take a small markdown quickly, it'll go fast. That's not true at all. Your markdown is the cheapest if it works. That's the only way it's going to be the cheapest. And if you have to take that item out in the back and shoot it in the head to get rid of it and mark it half off right away, get your money back because quickly get it off the floor. If you don't want a sale image, if you want to avoid a sale image, then why would you want merchandise that's being marked down to linger? That's going to give you the sale image. You want it out as fast as you can and make room for something that's going to sell better. Obviously, as we talked about, markdowns are an expense. We need to learn from every markdown. I sometimes call that the tuition you pay on the education of your customer. And there's one vertical. Celeste has now informed me that that's not true anymore. And she's always educating me, Nate. But that's not true anymore.
Exactly.
Cosmetics, though, in the past has been the one vertical that don't take markdowns. And that's what's interesting on this is why. Why don't they? What do they do if they don't take markdowns? They give away free stuff. They give samples
Exactly.
away for free. And another thing that's going on right now, also on markdowns that retailers are using more and more, it's a trend that works, is that shoppers prefer getting something extra for free than getting something cheaper. Now, there's been a lot of studies that have been done on this. One of the bullet points there is that 73% more hand lotion was sold when it was offered as a bonus pack than when it carried the equivalent discount. But there's something about getting things for free the shopper likes, and I would urge you to try doing that and incorporating that. And do I have
Yeah,
time
and I
for
would
one
say
story?
on that specifically, I mean, we have some retailers that I would say in apparel, both very high-end luxury as well as lower price points will offer, they find it to be have it more successful when someone's buying a series of full price items to actually include one of the sale price items, for free, effectively, as Paul was talking about. And if you think about it, that is one of the great ways in which you're recreating that bundle that historically you almost would say buy two, get one half off or whatever. You're effectively recreating that, but it's a delight. You're creating delight, you're creating excitement, you're creating something that's interesting. In the toy industry, they have blind boxes. Those are really, really hot right now. These are all great examples of doing exactly what Paul is talking about that are working right now.
Um, I'll go through these kind of quick, but these are all little things that are techniques. When you, when you, the consumer, when you tell the consumer they're saving money and not spending money, they tend to react better. So a weekend sale where all outerwear is save $50 in all outerwear is going to be more effective than 20% off in all outerwear. So
Right.
try that as well. Tell them the amount they're saving. You're reinforcing a positive. Um, um,
Exactly.
by the way, here's an interesting thing that has been studied. If you tell them it's a good price, they will believe you. I know this sounds crazy, but there's been studies on this. If you all you have to say is the lowest price of the season or everyday low price, and they will believe that that is the lowest price, even if it isn't. And we can talk about that later after the seminar. But if that works really well. Scarcity is one of the great things that will motivate people to buy, and we see it everywhere. There's only two left. Three people looked at this house today. You know, we only have one seat left on the airplane at this price. All kind of BS, but it motivates people to buy a scarcity. I love the sign right there on this because it says last ones, which is scarcity, and then it adds, "Be quick if you can read this. These are their best selling." So you have that we're almost out, but these are the very best sellers. So you're also telling me you should buy this because they're best sellers.
Exactly.
Um,
It's combining the concepts.
Right. So it's very, very powerful. And then, by the way, a lot of our clients who are probably a little bit more higher end, but don't like to have a sale rack on the floor outside of, January, July, their clearance months, right? And so they don't really like that. And so what they have done and has worked very well is they take in season markdowns, but they don't segregate it into a back of the back of the store and say, here's all the stuff nobody else wants. It's marked down to half off. They very creatively they put it in with the full price merchandise. And what
Exactly.
that has proven is if the consumer is going to, so let's say you have sweaters and they're all between 180 to $220. Here's a sweater for 190. I like this. Here's a sweater for 210. I like this. Here's a sweater for 200. I like this. Ooh, they suddenly encounter in their size a really cool looking sweater for $99. Now they're no longer looking at that as on the markdown bin. They're looking at that as, wow, that's a really good price. It's in my size. I think I'll try it on. That works. And it's a good way to keep your sales floor clean without having a bunch of sale racks on it 10 months of the year, but still move the merchandise, Nate, that's not selling,
Yep.
you know. And then
Absolutely.
and then the last one is, and it's kind of funny, but this does work too. It's color red. If you want to really, why do you see a lot of sale signs in red? Because it's been proven psychologically that it attracts, as we say, bulls and bargain hunters.
Yep.
So should we just go past this one? This was a little bit of one that we already did, I think. So the lowest price
Yeah,
does.
no, I think we've talked about it. And I think this is really, really the key concept here is we're not saying we're certainly not huge advocates of compressed margins in retail, quite the opposite. But this is a really, really important tool to keep the inventory health in the store very, very high. And if your inventory health is high, that is the number one determinant of how you keep growing. And so that is what we're really tying all of these things back is get the old out, bring in the fresh, and that gives you the opportunity to really catch what is trending and be able to grow in a healthy, sustainable, and profitable manner.
Wait, let me just say this. This is not a theory. This is just not something we had a Friday afternoon meeting about. We have proven this over 30 years of being in business that this works. And I cannot emphasize that enough. If you follow our plan and relative to the budgeting of the merchandise and the budgeting of the markdowns and follow our trending algorithms and buy accordingly and mark down when you should, there are death and there are taxes. And after that, pretty much I can guarantee we will improve your sales. And I know there's
Hmm.
very few guarantees in life, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that because I've been doing this for 45 years, and what we're talking about works. It's not a gimmick. It's basic blocking and tackling in retail that's always worked.
Absolutely. And it is all about, I think, that last point, which is how are you being nimble? How are you taking advantage of what's working, what's not? How are you using markdowns as a tool to not only generate the flow that you need in the store, but making sure that dollar works for you and you're getting the feedback of what is and is not working so that you can continue to double down, triple down on what makes your store special. That's that is that is what's really, really important. And so, as we said, if you want to contact us, we're going to run out of time in about 9 minutes. Please reach out with any of your questions. We have a series of questions we're going to jump into now. We're not going to be able to get through all of them, but please do reach out to us if you have any specific questions about your situation or anything like that. Celeste, what should we jump into right off the bat?
Okay, thanks, Nate. We have a grouping of questions. I'm going to start with Robin Doxy's question, which is she's brand new to Management One. She just restarted or started with us about a month and a half ago. Her question is, I put quite a bit on markdown immediately when I started with Management One, and a lot of it moved within 2 weeks. Very good. My question is, how long do I keep the stock on markdown, and how much is just too much to put on markdown?
I mean, this is it's funny, right? Because it's a little bit of the holding inventory question wrapped specifically on, clearing things out. And so if you've had it there for 2 weeks, my question is are the people that are who you want to see it, have they already seen it or not? And so if they've already seen it, leaving it out is not more time is not helping you with your sell through. And that's really what we're solving for with using the tool of a markdown. It was we're trying to move those units and sell them out. And so how can you more either get different audience to see it, i.e., you can do segregate your customer lists and show it to the folks that haven't come in store, you know that they haven't seen it yet, or do you need to be moving it to a different channel so that it can have a wider audience to see it? Paul, I don't know if you have a different take on that.
Yeah. So I'm going to admit something here right now that might shock everyone listening to my voice. But when I was a retailer back in the 1970s, uh, I would make mistakes. And my favorite one, Nate, was I bought, and God only knows what I was thinking in that showroom in New York when I bought a patchwork Madras plaid sport coat. It was the most hideous thing known to mankind. And I put it out. I think I only had about five of them. We put it out, and of course, we didn't sell any, and so we had to mark it down and didn't sell any. And I think we were at the mattress plaid. This was in the '70s. Would probably sell for $125. We had it at 19.99, and it still didn't sell. And at that point, that mattress plaid sport coat was donated to the homeless in the La Crosse, Wisconsin area who were then wearing mattress clad sport coats. There are times when you're going to have to just give it away. You're going to have to donate it. You're going to have to maybe take it home and sell it on a garage sale. But there's a point where you're going to not want it on your sales floor anymore and get it off
Correct.
because it's doing damage, and you know it when it gets down, and this happens to everybody. And when that point comes, when you've got our client that just talked about the first 2 weeks, the sale work, that's the most important 2 weeks. Anything left from that at this point in time, take a hard look at it. But most of the time, I would suggest at this point taking it off the floor and maybe donating it to charity or having a garage sale in your home. Get it off, get rid of it.
Okay, great. Thank you both, Nate and Paul. The next question is from Liz from Pitter Patter. She's asking, how do you make the transition to buying deeper instead of wider?
It's called courage. You have, because it is, you have to be brave, because because retailers that buy wide and thin, they're buying with a shotgun, and they're hoping some of it sticks, and a lot of it doesn't. And that's actually the more dangerous way to buy. Narrow and deep does take courage to do that. You have to be confident. I had another meeting with a retailer, and so she may be on this call, by the way, in Colorado.
Yep.
Our whole conversation last week was on this, of her being brave and buying. So instead of, because she was growing her business quickly, but I've been telling her to buy narrow and deep, and she goes, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, it means that sometimes you're going to have to double and triple sizes." What that means is sometimes those vendors that you know you sold out on fast all the time, you're going to have to double and triple up on certain things from key vendors. You're going to have to buy the guts of what really sells in your store and have it deeper. And when you do that, that is when you're going to see your sales really go up, because you'll be more purposeful. The word Nate uses, I like that word. You'll be more purposeful with your inventory. You'll be more targeted with your inventory. And that is absolutely critical to any retailer's success.
Yeah, and I think in order, a great way to build confidence is just starting with one or two classes, right? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
start with the place that you have the greatest amount of understanding of your customer. Start there, and then do exactly what Paul was saying.
Right. Very good point, Nate.
Okay. Thank you, Nate and Paul, for that answer. The next question is from Lisa from Creative Sewing. Her question is, are you supportive of semi-annual clearance sales?
Well, I am, well, not if you sell everything at full price. But what happens is what happens is that never happens. And so yes, I am supportive. But here's the thing: with a end of season clearance sale, it's like a trip to the dentist. You know you have to do it. You just don't want to be there a long time. So you want to make them short and fast. Sometimes I've recommended, Nate, do it over 2 weekends. Kick it off on a Friday and end it the following Sunday over a 10-day period. Just have it that, and put a clock on it, Nate, right? Tell them only
I was
three
going to say,
days
make
to
it an
go.
event. If you want to do that, make it an event. Highly seasonal things. Those are the best ones to that benefit from that strategy. Yes, short, sweet, to the point.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, we have a more of a comment from Terry Bale. He is with Management One. He is saying old inventory, clients and staff like fresh goods as it was Christmas. Do you guys agree with that comment?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's what you want to increase the energy. This is why a lot of people, this is why they work in retail. They want to see what's new. They want to be excited. It's a great way to maintain the energy in the store, 100%.
If a retailer, Terry, if a retailer is a smaller retailer and ever opens up UPS boxes on the sales floor and unpacks it where the customers see, it's like a moth to a flame. They will come scurrying over there because they say, "Oh, you just get this in." You have to remember that in psychology, human beings look at anything new as a way to reward themselves. It actually releases, Nate, you've mentioned this before, dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter chemical, it's the feel-good chemical. And so when
Yep.
we see something new, it's a promise to reward us. And so, and by the way, that also works, Terry, for markdowns. When you just take a markdown, when you take a new markdown and you're marking it down, that also attracts customers over to what you're doing. And you should sign it just reduced as well. By the way, Terry, I'm going to be in London in 2 months if you want to go have lunch.
Yeah, and I'd say, this is so important to be able to maintain the vibrancy, right? Is what we're talking about. We're unfortunately at time. One question I do see from Margaret: where do you get these sort of industry benchmarks? I mean, this is we've been around for a very long period of time, and so don't mean to be flippant, but we've looked at thousands and thousands of retailers over nearly 40 years. This is where we have a high degree of confidence. in these benchmarks. If there's something in your vertical or you want more specific, please reach out. And we're happy to answer any questions you might have. Well, listen, everyone, really appreciate you spending time on a Wednesday in the summer. This is, really fantastic. Paul, can you go back to the contact information just so people
Absolutely.
can have it? If you want to reach out, sorry, going up one. If you want to reach out, I really think that this is a rich topic. We're probably going to revisit. Also, if you want to give us more suggestions on what we should talk about next, that would be fantastic as well. And yeah, we'll be looking forward to seeing everyone in the comments and looking forward to having some great discussions going forward. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, Celeste.
Everyone, if we didn't get to your question, we will follow up with you and answer it. And finally, there'll be a poll that'll pop up at the end. If you would be kind enough to fill it out, it only helps us be better and be able to provide content that is relevant to what is happening right now in your world and within your store. Thank you again for joining.
And we'll be sending out the broadcast, yes.